Now let's dive into our second session for today. Clare Sweeney, digital and director, fundraising consultant at KeyPace Consults, will be busting some of the myths around legacy giving. So without further ado, let me hand over to Clare.
Legacy giving. This session is all about the myths, the facts, and everything in between, or at least I'll do my very best within the time constraints. A little bit about me then, what gives me the reason for being here today. I'm a digital and direct fundraising consultant. I've had many hats. In a previous career, I worked in advertising and with some marketing agencies. But then I helped set up a charity back in 2012, and that completely changed my view on things and really made me want to work for the third sector. And that's what I do. I do have a focus on digital innovation, but I also do some direct fundraising too, whether it's direct mail or direct training. So that's who I am. Legacy fundraising, how did I get into that? And the reason that I'm saying this is because I find this with many clients across the board, that it's something that quite often you fall into. It's not necessarily something that when you're at school you think, right, I'm going to grow up and I'm going to be a legacy fundraiser. That's not really the deal about it at all. Quite often within smaller organisations that don't have the luxury of having huge legacy teams, then it'll be something that somebody picks up because there's a sense of it being needed, but it's not really allocated perhaps the time or budget. And I'm just referring here to some lovely slides and information and research put together by Legacy Foresight. Nearly 2/3 of charity representatives say that legacies are a top fundraising priority, and yet it's not something that's really talked about massively. In fact, 56% of the charities that were surveyed to produce this research actually said that legacies were discussed a lot less than other areas of fundraising. So it's a really important income generation stream, and yet it really is a little bit of a Cinderella service for fundraising. Royalty of the future, but not necessarily looked after like royalty now. Yet the size of the UK legacy fundraising market is increasing. Of that, there is very little doubt. It's growing massively, and in the last year, since the kind of administration and process issues that Court and Tribunal Service we're experiencing, since that has been cleared, or at least the backlog looks like it's going to be cleared, and since there has been a massive increase in the death rate, largest for about 100 years with the pandemic, then the size of the market is going to continue to grow. In fact, it looks as though, well, conservative predictions suggest that by 2025, we're looking at almost 4 billion in charitable income, which is just huge. There's a graphic here, not the prettiest of graphics, but it just shows you the league table of how much that actually matters for charities' income. Top of the league, Cancer Research UK, their income last year, now this was a report that has been produced by Smee and Ford, 188.6 million. That's so many millions. Middle of the range, Dogs Trust, 39 million. That's 1 year's income. So we're talking huge amounts. And actually, for smaller charities too, they don't make this top 25, but the amount that they can benefit from gifts in wills, it can be a complete game changer. So, as I mentioned, HM Courts and Tribunal Services, there was an issue with them having some administrative procedures and processes that caused a bit of a problem with probate. And so gifts that were given in wills, instead of taking around about 6 months for them to be processed and for the beneficiaries to receive them, it's been taking a lot longer, so over 9 months. However, this looks as though it's been all sorted out, and so potentially this year, with those processes sorted out and with the increase in death rates, we're looking at a potential 11% uplift in legacy income. So it's a really big deal. However, only 14% of people left a charitable bequest in their will in 2019. Now, this has been consistent with previous years. Again, this is SME and Ford research, and this was released in their Legacy Trends in June of last year. So 14%, that says to me as a fundraiser, there is a whopping great big percentage of people who could actually be converted to leave a charitable gift once they've supported their nearest and dearest. And actually, research shows that if they do choose to leave a gift, then they get generous. And actually, the average number of charitable gifts when somebody does choose to give to charity is around about 6, sometimes a lot more, sometimes less. But once somebody is convinced of the need to give a charitable gift, they do get generous. So this is another chart, and it just shows how the purpose of this chart shows charities in the last year that have had a change in their income. So Oxfam, there's been a massive uplift. Now, it might have been that previous years there had been a decrease because of some of the publicity about some of the campaigns and some of the problems within the organisation. But as you can see from these here as well, there's quite a lot of charities from the environmental sector that are seeing an uplift, because that's much higher on the agenda. So it is possible within a fairly short amount of time to get people to start leaving you gifts in wills. That said, normally the legacy pipeline is very, very long. On average, it takes between about 6 and 20 years between the time that somebody writes their last will and them actually dying and the beneficiaries within that will receiving the benefit from it. So maybe that's right. It is a bit of a Cinderella service, because if you are facing difficult times, which many charities are doing right now, what do you choose to do? Do you invest your time fundraising for something that's going to happen in about 7 years' time? And realistically, you might not even be in that role. We fundraisers do move around quite a bit. Or do you do something that is kind of crisis management and reactive, and do you try and do a campaign that's transactional and gets money in now? That's the problem that legacy fundraising faces. It's a fix it now rather than perhaps the bigger picture. But, and I've included this again from Legacy Foresight, really like the graphics, 100 people a day write a charity into their will. And it's growing. So it's massive. The opportunity is absolutely huge. And what I'd like to say with this workshop is that you don't need to focus on one rather than the other. You can do your campaigns that will have impact now, but it is completely appropriate and okay to include a soft legacy message within those communications. And actually, I'm a bit of a champion of including a "did you know we benefit from gifts in wills" type message with every single bit of communication that you actually deliver to your supporters. I think it's wholly appropriate, not only because it's a bit of a drip feed and somebody won't necessarily straight away rush out and sort out their affairs and leave you a great big chunk of a gift in a will, but if you have that message frequently within your communications and sensitively or just factually, we benefit from gifts in wills, then that does have a real impact. So again, charity bequests are expected to spike this year. The challenge for fundraisers: we do have the challenge of predicting future gifts. And this is why, as I was saying before, it doesn't always reach the priority that the income that it can bring in deserves. And I think there's a question of sensitivity here. A lot of people last year working within the charitable sector actually withdrew their legacy messagings at the start of the crisis, the pandemic. It was thought that we might appear to be mercenary or it was inappropriate. Now, I'm not saying that across the board, because I was watching a lot of daytime TV, and even I was surprised at the amount of legacy adverts that some of the bigger and perhaps more confident organisations were delivering. There was loads of them. But by the same token, some smaller organisations were being very sensitive and were not marketing gifts in wills and were pulling campaigns. Now, my question is that our sensitivity, or is it our supporters' sensitivity? As fundraisers, we tend to be empathetic and supportive and really caring about our supporters. But perhaps this goes a little bit too far in some cases, because I mean, I'm lucky enough to have my gran still. I mean, she's nearly 90, absolutely fabulous. But she will talk about leaving a gift in a will. And it's a brutally honest fact that she's not going to be with us forever. But she's all right with that, you know. So I think sometimes the reason for not having legacy messages or legacy conversations even is because of a sensitivity on our own behalf that we as legacy fundraisers or broader fundraisers really need to get over. But it is hard to navigate. And we do have some additional challenges as well. Not only are we challenged by what's appropriate for us to say, what do our supporters want to hear, but also quite often we have massive, great big CRM databases. We have a huge churn in terms of people moving between organisations. So how do we effectively identify people in the past who have actually said to us, look, we're going to support you, if they have actually come forward and said that to us? Because of the last 12 months, there's been some really impressive fleet of foot virtual events being created. However, those face-to-face conversations and those really valuable events where we could all get together and have a cup of tea and a piece of cake and chat face-to-face with people, that opportunity has been lost. So perhaps we're missing out on, well, we're definitely missing out on one particular channel of being able to speak to our supporters. And we're really unsure about what the future holds. So there are some myths as well that we've got to get over. Myth number one, death is dreary. Well, yes, it is. Of course it is. It's not brilliant. But it is a fact of life. We're all going to die. That's sure as anything. And we're really good at planning for birthdays, for anniversaries, for Mother's Day, Father's Day, all the rest. But for death, we're a little bit rubbish. So if we can think about end of life planning as a positive step, if we can say that the message is you need to write yourself a will and please include a charitable bequest, please, that would be lovely. If we do that because we're telling our supporters that it's helping their loved ones when they've gone, and actually it's a reflection purely of what means the most. You've lived a whole lifetime. I mean, blooming well done you. That's absolutely fantastic. But what has your life meant? What are the values that you want to be remembered for? So really, I don't think that legacy fundraising needs to be dreary or even really all about death. It's all about life, and it's all about an individual's values and how that aligns and matches and complements the causes that they really care for. Myth number two, legacy fundraisers. Now, I did show you that £188 million income stream from one of our biggies. However, legacy fundraising doesn't need to be exclusive. It's not just for the biggies. And the reason I've stuck on one of my clients' logos there, I'm currently working with a fairly small hospice, absolutely brilliant, wonderful organisation. But the reason it actually started was on the back of a legacy. It's not a huge organisation, but it changed the way that it could serve the community because, well, it actually became a charity because of a legacy. And I'm sure as anything that it's not the only small charity that began with a gift in a will. So even if you are a smaller organisation, it's really important just to let people know that if they are writing their will, they might have a very close connection or care very much about the same things that you care about. But they might, as they're writing it, think, oh, well, I'm not really sure if that organisation actually accepts gifts in wills. So I'll write one for one of the biggies instead. So we need to make it inclusive, and we need to make it clear that we do accept that kind of revenue. Yes, please. Don't have time and resource. This is myth number 3. Well, it doesn't necessarily need to be a huge TV campaign that you launch. It doesn't necessarily mean to be a huge direct mail campaign. Just having legacy conversations and having legacy conversations within the team. Let's increase the amount of times we talk about gifts in wills. It's actually happened in the last 12 months because so many other fundraising streams have been compromised with the events and community and corporate. Everything has felt the pinch. However, this type of fundraising, it's legacy fundraisers' time to shine. It really is. And we can afford the time, and it's worth investing what we can afford. And it doesn't necessarily mean that that is going to cost a lot, but the return on investment is huge. So I say we can't afford not to look at legacy fundraising. Back to my Cinderella thing, the stigma. I think quite often we'll have fairly young fundraising teams that might think, oh, the old people don't really look. Back to the thing about my gran. I think it's more our problem rather than the supporters' issue. And actually, we're seeing people more and more, younger people are making end-of-life plans. So let's remove the stigma. Let's just, wipe that slate clean and say, this is a type of fundraising. This is a type of doing good, which is really important. And let's do more of it, please. Well, here we go. Embracing the opportunity, which is pretty much what I was saying previously. Let's find out what's appropriate for us in terms of resource, in terms of capability, in terms of our audience. And let's have a real think about what we can do as legacy fundraisers. For me, and I've done quite a lot of research actually in the last few years, and considered an agency that I've sort of had a look at some of the organisations that they've worked with, big and small organisations, and I've really dug deep into seeing what kind of messages resonate and are effective for supporters. Now, one of Consider's campaigns recently, they did something with the British Red Cross, and I think it's a really good example of where a fundraising message is translated so clearly as a legacy message. They did a campaign around whenever there is trouble and strife and problem, the British Red Cross will provide protection in the darkest hour, comfort when it's needed the most, hope when all seems lost. And by leaving a gift in a will, you are part of that care and comfort and protection. You might not be able to be physically there. You might not actually be physically here at all, but your impact will mean that protection, comfort, and hope is actually received on your behalf, but to other people. Another really good message is if you want to think about a legacy message that is effective, what you need to do is go right back to the original problem or set of issues that your charity was set up in order to solve. That's what charities are here for. We're that gap, or we try and fill that gap. There's a problem. There isn't a solution. We're going to help to work towards it. Those are your legacy messages. So this campaign for Diabetes UK, again, thank you, Consider, make a cure for diabetes your legacy. That's simple. Diabetes UK wants a cure for diabetes. By leaving a gift in your will to them, that's what they're going to try and do. It really is just look at your mission and then translate it into your legacy messaging. How can we communicate our mission? Well, first of all, we've got to know it. Really look at our case for support. If we have one, if we haven't got a case for support, let's get one. That's simply a statement of why you should matter to your supporters. What problem are you solving? What are you going to do? How are you going to do it? And then where do we put our messages? Well, I've already said everywhere. Please put them everywhere as often and as frequently as possible. And then the next challenge is, how do we measure their impact? This is the trickiest one, to be honest. And this is one that we have to continue to do as fundraisers. There are some brilliant examples again of where to put your message. It can be through the post. A lot of people are opening a lot more mail because we're in the house at the moment. However, this is a digital conference, and so I'm really interested in digital solutions for legacy fundraisers. I've already mentioned that we've got television campaigns and social media. That people are online so much more at the moment. Have a really clear and impactful message online. Okay, so what is your message? I keep coming back to this. It's your call to action. Now, in terms of what your message is, some charities have an easier deal than others. One of my favourite legacy campaigns actually was produced by the Scottish Wildlife Trust a number of years ago. I think it was 2014 actually. And it's this is a sort of a visual summary of it, but actually it was a video and it was shot over beautiful landscape. And it was basically on Wednesday, Jean helped protect some osprey chicks. On Thursday, she helped to plant trees for red squirrels. And you think, oh gosh, Jean's been really busy. Friday, she helped to change the law to safeguard land and issues. And you're kind of thinking, oh gosh, she's either a CEO that's really hands-on or she's a super volunteer. But then the last statement is on Saturday, it was 5 years since Jean died. And I think that's really powerful, because it shows that even though Jean is no longer there, it personalizes it for a start. I mean, I don't know whether there was a Jean, but it makes it feel personable and relatable. But then also it just shows the ongoing impact that her gift has given. The problem that other charities may have is that it's great as an environmental charity to be able to show fantastic landscape and talk about all fixing the world. However, other sectors might have slightly stickier problems that are less palatable. But then just be upfront. I work in the hospice sector as well. I've got quite a few hospice clients, and so their way, because it's all about end of life and there isn't a solution necessarily for somebody who's dying, they've reached the point where they just need comfort rather than anything else. So the message is here is just ask. We really benefit from gifts in wills. Please consider us. Or I quite like what I really like what Rennie Grove Hospice did. So a lady who wanted to enjoy her garden for one last summer, rather than going into a hospital, she gets support from a hospice at home care, and a nurse comes and visits her day or night. And it just shows what the hospice movement does and where your impact can be. So how do we say it? We're at home more and we're paying attention more. We're paying attention to stuff that comes through the door. We're paying attention to stuff that's on our screens. So our content is crucial. But also, as well as having a message that is emotional and engaging, what do we want to actually do? What do we want that person to do when they've heard it? Well, ultimately, we want them to go out and we want them to write a will, or actually not necessarily even go out, go online and start to get their affairs in order. What I'm really excited about as a charity fundraiser in this sector is that there is more opportunities now to make online wills, and there's still a little bit of controversy about whether or not there'll be some legal hiccups in the future. However, I think that the legal profession, which is not notoriously known for being fast moving, and I can say this, I've got a law degree, so I know I've been there in that world too. But it's this last 12 months has also made changes within the law, changes that haven't been changed for hundreds of years. So I think there are definitely opportunities in where we can put our messages. Online, digital behavior has changed. That's absolutely the case. And I think the old-fashioned view that, and I spoke to somebody quite recently, actually, quite a senior person within a charity, and he wanted to attract a broader legacy audience. He lived in an area which he knew was quite wealthy, and he just said, "I just know that my supporters are not online." And I kind of said, "How do you know?" He said, "Oh, they're not responding to that space. I've done one advert on Facebook, and I've not had anybody come knocking on the door and ask to write a will there and then." Legacy fundraising requires multiple messages across multiple channels over a prolonged amount of time. But the good news is that our silver surfers, our key audience, they are in that digital space. And what we need to do is give them a way to be able to connect with us. So, on the back of that, what digital tools are there for legacy fundraisers? Now, because it's been a form of fundraising that isn't necessarily highly invested in unless you've got a massive budget, are there any digital tools? Well, I'm really excited to be part of being able to share the fact that there is a new digital legacy fundraising tool designed specifically for legacy fundraisers. And it's so new, it's only just launched. It's called Charity Intentions, and it's borrowed the intelligence and the tech from in memory giving and applied it to legacy fundraising. So what is it? It's a digital space where supporters can let a charity know that they intend to leave a gift in their will. Okay, so why would a supporter choose to let their intentions be known? Oh, I'll start again. Sorry. Okay, so why would a supporter choose to make their intention known? It's already been demonstrated with in memory fundraising that supporters are really keen to become part of a community. The whole idea and the discovery that's happened with visual fundraising is that there is an appetite for people to make a donation and then share their reason why. So Charity Intentions has taken this idea that's already in action and already being evidenced, but applied it to legacy fundraisers. So what a supporter is invited to do is to say why they care for a charity, say that they intend to leave a gift in the future, and then create a visual representation of that to join in with other people. So literally a leaf on a tree, a drop in an ocean, or whatever visual page you create, an individual can sign up and say, I'm going to support this charity by a gift in my will because I think it's wonderful, or because they've helped me do this, or for whatever their reason. Now, the reason that supporters might want to do that is to see who they are with other people. In terms of the fundraiser, then Charity Intentions creates an opportunity to actually see the motivations why somebody wants to leave a gift, offer them the chance to be thanked while they're still alive, potentially point them in the direction of will writing services or solicitors or other end of life planning providers, And then really capture the data. There's some really clever mini CRM function behind that will allow a fundraiser to report effectively on the future pledges that they've always found so difficult to predict and to report upon. Again, it's a brand new tool, so it's a case of watch this space, or actually, if you're a charity, get signed up, be in the first wave and test the concept. Now we know, and research is actually evidencing that there is a massively strong link between in-memory giving and legacy. So it sort of makes sense that that is the place where you put your messages. Now, the visual platform that I was talking about before for in-memory, Emma Giving, you can take a look and see how in-memory giving is already using a visual platform. And then you can see how that would work for legacy fundraising too. But what I would also say is that any messages that you do around in memory, think of those as being the start of a legacy donor journey. So, summing up, really, legacy fundraising, generating legacy income is definitely desirable. Is it feasible? I say yes. Yes, it is feasible. And it doesn't necessarily need to be too expensive. Just start those conversations, understand what your case for support is, your mission, and communicate that. And let people know that you do accept gifts in wills and they make a massive difference. So then it becomes viable. And that little sweet spot in the middle, that's where innovation, where new digital tools will enable you to take your legacy fundraising into the future, into this time where people are spending so much time online. I'm going to end on, well, I'm not going to end because I'm going to take some questions, and you can pick my brains if you've not had enough of me chatting already. But this section, I'm just going to give a nod to Chuck, he's one of my favourite authors, actually, and he's deliciously weird, which is great. But he says we all die, and the goal isn't to live forever. The goal is to create something that will. And that's what legacy fundraising does. It extends your life, and it extends the values that you held dear, so that even when you're not there, your impact can still be there.
Well, thank you very much, Claire, for this very insightful presentation. And hello, I don't know if you can hear us yet, but we have quite a few questions coming in already. Hello, Claire.
Hello.
How are you?
Mute to myself.
Yeah. Yeah, lovely. Well, welcome. Welcome again. I'm going to dive in now. We will answer questions till 10:25, and then Claire will head over to our remote platform to answer more questions. So let's dive in with the first one, which asks, how can you approach legacy giving as a small charity? Where can we start?
Well, this is something that I think, get those legacy conversations going, do as much talking about legacies as possible, and just debunk the myths that it's something that isn't relevant for everybody to do. I think I might have covered that question in the later slides. So it's just talk about gifts in wills and don't be afraid to.
Lovely. Yes, get this conversation started. Obviously, the next question from Chris, again, from a small charity perspective, they're concerned about getting the wording legally correct. Are there standard wordings available that can be downloaded to add to websites?
Yeah, and this is something I'm really quite passionate about. I think that sometimes charities can get themselves into a little bit of a tangle because they think they need to be completely au fait with the law before they can actually start talking about gifts in wills. We're not legal advisors. That's not our job. Our job is to talk about our mission and the problems that we want to solve. And quite often I say, if somebody sets up a direct debit, we don't go knocking on the door and check to see that they've got enough food in the fridge and all the rest of it. We don't worry about that sort of side of things. We just say, thank you very much for supporting us and giving us a donation. With a legacy, leave it up to the people to understand the means. Just so long as you're clear about your charity and your charity number, that's really helpful. Then that's all we need to do. We need to give inspiration, not legal advice.
Lovely. Thank you. Moving on to another question from Sarah. Again, from a small team perspective, without the human resource of one-to-one legacy fundraising, have you seen any good examples of online digital legacy fundraising calls to actions, or anything that you could recommend?
All I can say is check out Charity Intentions. It's brand new. It's recruiting the first lot of charities now, and it allows you to actually do your whole legacy fundraising. So you can actually share your legacy messages. They'll even create an animated video and a show reel so that you can show those messages of impact, and then they can help you throughout supporting your supporters to let them know that they intend to leave you a gift in the will.
Lovely, thank you. Moving on to Jason's question, is there any research on the age at which people start thinking about writing a will with a charitable element?
Yeah, it tends to be over 55s. Sometimes people will start to consider writing a will when they're in their sort of 30s and they're getting into relationships, but then actually don't get around to doing it. But research also shows that once you've made a will once, you're much more likely to do it again. And the most significant wills tend to be for people over 80. The actual legacy pipeline between the time somebody makes their final will and them actually dying can be between 6 and 20 years. Mm-hmm. So the average legacy pipeline is about 7 years. And that's why showing your intentions is so important, because otherwise it's so hard to predict.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, it's a quite long pipeline, like you said. Bhavini is asking, that they've had a few people contacting them in the past year saying they are considering leaving a gift in their will. They've given the information. What next? Well, when and how should they get in touch with them again?
You gather your consent, you offer them opportunities. I mean, it's really difficult at the moment because of COVID. You'd normally be able to have small little face-to-face events, which would be really helpful. I'll just say again, check out Charity Intentions and see if you can set up there and get some digital engagement, and see if that helps.
Lovely, thank you. Another question from Terence Scott. And he's asking, how do you determine the success in terms of legacy fundraising? Do you directly follow up with people that you have approached and ask whether they actually action that, or what are the measure of success?
This has been the problem for a very long time, because you put the message out there and then there's no way to actually see whether it's hit or whether it's registered until those 7 or 8 years later. Again, Charity Intentions is there to try and solve that solution, and we'll just have to see, because it's a brand new tool in the marketplace, but that has been the problem, and that is why actually people will neglect legacy fundraising and go for something a lot more transactional and immediate, just because of that delay.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Katrina is asking, how do you think we can get other teams on board with having a legacy message across all communications?
Yeah, that's a tricky one, isn't it? Because sometimes it can be a little bit lonely as a legacy fundraiser. You're there on your own banging the drum, and nobody wants to hear about the death talk. By debunking it, I actually think it's quite optimistic at the moment for legacy fundraisers. I think a little bit like the mental health revolution, like it used to be a taboo, and now it's not. Everybody is comfortable talking about mental health. I think legacy fundraising's time is coming, and I think it'll be made easier. And just because of the fundraising revenue streams are still compromised, it is something that we can effectively invest in.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Kate. Very interesting. Claire. I was reading the upcoming questions from Kate, because you mentioned a couple of times this new platform called Charity Intentions. Do you know if it's free to register, or how much does it cost?
Yeah, the very first demo actually is tomorrow. So you just go straight to the website at www.charityintentions.com, and then you can book a demo, and that's completely free to have a look and then see what's on offer, and then see if it's for you.
Okay, lovely. Well, very simple. Super. That's absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much again, Claire, for this brilliant presentation.